Hey everyone, welcome back. My name is Mac, and today we're talking about my Elemental wishlist for patch 12.1. This is exactly what it sounds like, pretty much just a list of things I would love to see moving into the next big content patch. Everything I'm going to be talking about today is about making the spec more enjoyable to play, not necessarily about balance, because that can always come later. And in no particular order, let's start off with the newest button on our bar, Voltaic Blaze. You press Voltaic Blaze, it slaps a flame shock onto a whole pack, and with Purging Flames, your next lava burst detonates into every single one of those flame shock targets. That's the big AoE meatball bonanza, and it's one of the most satisfying things this spec can do, even if it's technically only really used in Farseer. My first suggestion here is super small. Just build a Lava Surge proc into the Voltaic Blaze button, or rather into the Purging Flames talent. This brings Voltaic Blaze full circle, becoming an instantly satisfying whirlwind of meatballs. It turns it into a clean two-step combo, and while it's not the most ambitious of changes, I do think it would be a nice quality of life improvement. But one step up on our wish list, we have another AoE button with Earthquake. If you play Elemental or watched any of my videos, you already know what the problem I'm about to say is. It is a static puddle in a game where nothing stands still. You drop it, the tank repositions a half a second later, and now your AoE spender is heroically nuking the floor where the pack used to be. So my change here would be, why not let it follow the fight? My logic is kind of similar to how Blizzard changed Efflorescence for Resto Druids, only Earthquake, instead of following a Life Loom target, would follow a Lightning Rod target. Just make Earthquake reposition every tick or so to a nearby enemy that has Lightning Rod on it, so it chases the pack instead of sitting somewhere uselessly. The number of times I see a tank pull mobs out of an Earthquake just by a smidge is honestly comical. Fixing this wouldn't make Earthquake any more overpowered, it would just stop wasting it the second anything moves, which is constantly. Earthquake's not super powerful, and the area of effect isn't very large, so doing this would fix a lot of problems for Elemental. And honestly, we could even just make this a choice node in the talent tree as well if we really wanted to. Not that I want to, but we could do it. Okay, but with the quality of life stuff out of the way, let's move into the real meat and potatoes of this video with the cooldowns, or more specifically, Stormkeeper. Right now, Stormkeeper sits at a minute cooldown or a 45-second cooldown thanks to Rolling Thunder in the Stormbringer talent tree. And if you're playing today, you're probably thinking that feels alright. And it does feel alright. For now. Because it only feels good because of our current tier set. Our 12.0 tier set is quietly keeping Stormkeeper up with the haste buff and an extra charge every time you cast it. This extra charge is doing a lot of invisible work because it smooths out the rotation and hides how clunky the button is underneath. The second this tier set goes away, all of those bonuses, the haste buff, the extra charge, goes away, and it goes right back to feeling clunky and not fun to press. And on top of that, a 45-second cooldown is just an awkward number to live with. It doesn't line up cleanly with anything. Your cooldowns are on their own timers, and that 45 seconds just floats in the middle of being annoying. So my ask here is to just drop it to a flat 30-second baseline, and that entire problem just goes away. Without the haste buff or the third charge, it's going to feel clunky either way. Dropping it to 30 seconds is just clean. It slots naturally into your burst, it's kind of trivial to track, and it just feels good to hit. If we leave it at a minute, as it currently stands without the Rolling Thunder talent, it's just going to feel terrible, and 45 seconds is just awkward. Ultimately, this kind of comes down to wanting the button to feel good on its own merits than relying on a tier set to carry it for the entire patch. I don't really necessarily care how you change it. Leave it at 3 stacks, keep it a minute, or put it at 2 stacks at a 30 seconds. I don't care. Just fix that awkward 45 seconds. It doesn't feel good. But speaking of cooldowns, that brings us to the big one, and likely the most divisive thing on this entire list. Ascendance is the heart of the spec. It is the center of almost every decision we make, and if you've watched more than one of my videos, you've heard me say that a lot of times already. But right now, it still feels kind of awkward given that we got deeply rooted elements taken away. It's a 2-minute or 3-minute CD based on an awkward talent choice. So I have really 2 suggested changes wrapped up in this conversation, and I want to split them up evenly. The first change would be about the Ascendance button itself. Then the second suggested change would be focused on the Apex talents that are built around it. So let's start off with Ascendance. Right now, First Ascendant pulls Ascendance from a 3-minute baseline cooldown to a 2-minute baseline cooldown, which is genuinely fine. But here's where I'd like to take it instead. I'd rather lean into Ascendance being a real event than keep shaving it down to press it more often. 2 minutes already puts us on the slower end compared to a lot of other classes, mashing their big cooldowns every minute or so. And I think that rarity is a strength we should double down on, not necessarily fight against. So here's the wishlist version. Keep Ascendance on its true 3-minute base cooldown. In exchange for that extra minute, buff it back up to roughly where it was in the War Within. It doesn't have to be exactly where it was in the War Within because it was very powerful, but just somewhere closer to it than it is right now. For those 15 seconds or so, you should be absolutely cooking, watching overloads chain off of overloads while the meter does something genuinely stupid, and then the window closes and you go back to the building towards the next one pattern of play. That 3-minute cooldown is the price you pay for that kind of power, and I think it's absolutely worth paying. If you ever got the chance to experience it, you'd know what I'm talking about. That big, rare, screen-shaking burst window that you build towards beats a smaller one that comes around a little sooner every day of the week. And yes, I already know how many of you likely disagree with me on this, and I want to hear it, but bear with me because I'm not done. That's only half the story. We still have the Apex talents around it because that's where the other half of these changes live. Mainly, I have 3 little words for you. Deeply rooted elements. I already know a lot of you are probably sick of hearing about this from me, but DRE would make the spec feel so much more engaging, and I don't think anyone can deny that. For the newer players out there, DRE was the random Ascendance proc gameplay we used to have in the War Within. Instead of Ascendance being purely a button you pressed on cooldown, you'd get random chances for it just to go off on its own, mid-rotation, out of nowhere on your Maelstrom spenders. It kind of felt like a little jackpot moment where you get this jolt of your rotation suddenly detonating and you have to react to this super hyper-inflated fast gameplay rotation. That was a lot of fun, and I think there's an opportunity to slot that back into the Apex talents. Keep the first 3 Apex talents basically as they are, the 2 increasing our crit strike damage and chance, and the 1 bumping our overload damage. Those are fine, they're not super exciting, but as early Apex talents picks, they do their job, and they allow that small tuning knob that Blizzard likes to have. But then we make Deeply Rooted Elements the final Apex talent. A capstone should be the spiciest, most build-defining option you can reach for, and Ascendance procs that rewire the entire rotation is exactly that. Admittedly though, some people hated the randomness, and that is a completely fair take. Tying a chunk of your damage to what feels like a slot machine isn't for everyone, even if it wasn't necessarily completely random. But that's kind of also the point of it being a final Apex talent instead of being forced on you in the actual talent tree. If you love the playstyle, you path all the way down and grab it, and if you'd rather play something more clean and predictable without it, you just stop at those throughput nodes and never touch it. Nobody gets DRE shoved down their throat, and nobody who loves it gets told it doesn't exist anymore. So if we look at what this change does, we effectively delete a dead Apex node, or a very boring one at that, we kill a filler talent in the process, and we put real identity decision where the capstone should actually be. And that's really 3 problems solved with 1 move, all built around a cooldown that already defined Elemental Shaman. I know some of you are going to hard disagree with me on that, but either way I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below, so let me know what you think. Now given that we just kind of talked about talents, let's take a deeper look at the structure of the talent tree because there's a lot of dead weight in it. Our talent tree is freaking chock full of boring, useless stat nodes. Increase haste by 3%, increase your damage by 3%, increase your intellect by 3%, increase your damage by 2%. Those aren't talents. Those are just speed bumps that you click through on the way to get to the talents you actually care about or need to pick up. And you don't even really necessarily choose them, you just path through them because they're sitting there between something good that you actually want or the damage you get from them is just too good to pass up. A talent point should ultimately be a decision you make. Do I want this effect or that effect? It's an interesting choice. Do I want 3% or 3% is not a choice, it's just a formality. You could swap any one of those nodes for a picture of my stupid little face and it would change exactly 0 things about how the spec plays. And the part that really gets me is we used to have genuinely fun stuff living in those exact slots too. They were buttons, procs, or choices, and ultimately in Midnight they got sanded down to just flat percentages because that was the safe, easy thing to tune. I get why it happened. A flat 3% is impossible to balance wrong. Well, it's Blizzard we're talking about, but it's very difficult to balance wrong, right? But difficult to balance and interesting are not the same thing. So just please strip the dead stat nodes out and give me anything that makes me think for more than half a second, and I'll be happy. Actually, speaking of those new talent nodes that you should be replacing, I've got you covered with at least one of the perfect candidates for the freed up slots. Give us back the Thunderstorm knockup, please. For anyone who didn't play with the seasons we had it, the talent just turned our Thunderstorm knockback into a knock-up instead. Instead of yeeting a pack across the room and scattering it for your melee to chase, you just pop them up in the air, right in place. Admittedly, sometimes you want the knockback for spacing, but a lot of the times, most of the times, you want the knock-up for stops, and the knockback is really just trolling in anything that isn't open-world content, if we're being honest. It costs Blizzard basically nothing. The tech already exists because we literally had it last patch, and it cleans up a dead spot on the tree while we're at it. But the last couple of wishlist items are on the defensive side, starting with a tiny one that is just a pure annoyance that should not exist, and that's Ghost Wolf. Specifically, the move speed and damage reduction from the Spirit Wolf talent that ramps up over 4 seconds. You hit the button to get safe, and then you stand there for 4 whole seconds, slowly becoming safe, which kind of defeats the entire point. If I'm reaching for a defensive adjacent button, it's because something is happening right now, not because something is happening in 4 seconds from now. No. I genuinely cannot tell you what this ramp is protecting against. It's not a power concern, and the numbers are relatively tiny overall. It seems like a PvP balancing issue, pushing and leaking into PvE, but I don't care about PvE. Just make that a PvP talent if that was what you were worried about. Simple fix. Currently, it just exists to feel bad, like someone designed it on a Friday afternoon late in the day and nobody has touched it since. Just make it instant. Full effect the moment you press it, done. Even reduce the damage reduction effect to 10%. I don't care. Just make it instant, please. Alright, and this leads me into the final survivability point, which is, I believe, genuinely the most overdue thing on this list, Astral Shift. Elemental is one of the very few specs walking around with exactly one true defensive, and that's Astral Shift. Once that's on cooldown, we're holding our Earth Elemental and Spirit Wolf together with tape and hoping that the next mechanic doesn't pick us. Earth Elemental gives us a health buff, and Spirit Wolf needs you to be in Ghost Wolf for about 4 seconds to get any meaningful damage reduction, meaning you're doing 0 damage for those 4 seconds, so calling those defensives is just kind of being generous. Meanwhile, look at what other classes get. Evokers get 2 charges of Obsidian Scales. Demon Hunters get 2 charges of Blur. Both meta specs. Imagine that. I wonder why that is. Crazy. Those specs get to eat an unavoidable hit and still have an answer in their back pocket. We don't. So I want the same treatment. Give us 2 charges of Astral Shift. And I'm not asking for that for free because I'm not completely unreasonable here. In exchange, drop the duration to maybe 8 seconds or the damage reduction total to 30%. Or put each charge on its own 2-minute cooldown. Either trade-off is fine. I'm not trying to become unkillable, I'm just trying to not get global the one time my single defensive happens to be down. It's a fairness thing more than a power thing, and it'd do a huge amount for how comfortable the spec feels deep into a hierarchy. But that's the list. Some of it's tiny with the instant Spirit Wolf, the Thunderstorm knockup, and cleaning the filler stat garbage out of our talent tree, but some of it is bigger with a shorter cooldown Stormkeeper, the beefier 3-minute Ascendance with baseline overload bonus, and deeply rooted elements sitting at the top of our Apex talents. And to clarify, this isn't me saying the spec is dead, please save us. Elemental is genuinely fine right now. It's all just the difference between a spec that works and a spec that feels great to play, and that gap matters more than people give it credit for. Realistically, I don't expect any of these to be changed in 12.1. But, you know what? A guy can dream. But I'd love to know which one of these changes you'd fight alongside me with, or the ones you'd fight me on. Especially that Ascendance change, because it's kind of interesting. So let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, go ahead and drop a like. It really does help the channel. And if you want more Elemental or WoW content, hit the subscribe button so you don't miss anything. Also, I've been streaming over on Twitch, so if you want to hang out, ask questions, or just watch Raid or do keys, feel free to stop by. And if you want to support the channel a bit more directly, I've got a Patreon link below where I offer Elemental coaching and additional content, along with a Discord where you can talk about the spec, ask questions, or just hang out with the community. But yeah, that's all I got for this one, so thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and as always, I will see you in the next one.